All right, well, welcome to the 2021-2022 budget. And this evening, we're going to recommend the accelerated budget opt-out resolution. What I wanted to update the board on is just give them a presentation and tell them what Act 1 is and why we have to do this and why this impacts our timeline for adoption. Next slide, please, Mr. Stengel. So why does the board have to do this so early in January? We need to comply with PA School Code, Act 1 of 2006 and Act 25 of 2011. So there are two separate options that we could go for in January. The first is the preliminary budget adoption, which requires the board to advertise and adopt the preliminary budget and state their intentions to apply for referendum exceptions that exceed the Act 1 index. The second option, which we're recommending here tonight, is the accelerated budget opt-out resolution, which resolves the board's ability to balance the budget without exceeding the Act 1 index. Next slide, please, Mr. Stengel. So what is Act 1? For the benefit in the board, for the board and the public, the Act 1 index is the Taxpayer Relief Act of 2006, and that came along with the establishment of legal gambling here in the Commonwealth. The Act 1 establishes the Act 1 index, which is used to determine the maximum tax increases for a school district. It also eases the financial burden of homeownership by reducing taxes with gaming revenue. So anyone that has a homestead value on their house, they get a reduction on their tax bill, and we receive this money from the state rather than through our local taxes. And it also establishes the process for raising taxes above the index through referendum exceptions or referendum voting. So this is all the timelines and everything that has to go through with that.
Hey, Rob, I know it's not on your slide, but could you briefly tell the board how the Commonwealth determines the Act 1 index? There's a formula for it.
There is a formula for it. It goes along with CPI and earned income taxes, and they use that to determine the inflationary index. It's been as low as 2.1%. This year, it's actually 3.5%. Next slide, Mr. Stengel. So tonight, we're recommending the accelerated budget opt-out resolution, and this will allow us to follow our normal budget process and not establish a budget that we absolutely know nothing about here in January to shock the world. This resolution states that the district does not intend to exceed the Act 1 index, again at 3.5%. And this resolution must be adopted 110 days before the primary election on May 18th. That is because if the board would choose to go to referendum to raise taxes above the index, it would need to be on the ballot. So next slide, please, Mr. Stengel. So as I keep saying, the Act 1 index is 3.5%. That equates to 0.8676 mils. If you can look back to 2009, 2010, our average millage increase over that time has been 0.5 mils. Some years with higher, some years with lower, but over the past many years, that's what it's been. And the average increase has been 1.23%, which is below the 3.5% this year. The 10-11 year was an anomaly as we were grandfathered in to issue bonds for the high school renovation. That's why that increase is so high. In the 13-14 number, it reads as 0 because that was a reassessment year. The whole county got reassessed, and we had to do a revenue neutral calculation that year that resulted in no tax increase. Next slide, Mr. Stengel. So tonight with the opt-out resolution, we're going to focus on the blue category. So as I said, the millage equivalent of 3.5% index is 0.8676 mils. A dollar equivalent, factoring in our collection percentage and our homestead receipts, would be just over $2.3 million. Without doing the early budget, the preliminary budget, we do leave on the table the referendum exceptions, and you'll see the millage equivalents, about $183,000 there. Again, looking back at the 0.5 increase, over the last 12 or so years, we're doing kind of a balancing act between not overtaxing the community, making up for last year's tax increase, and we're still going to have to use a little bit of fund balance again to balance our budget this year. So it puts us in the midst of being fiscally prudent and also, responding to the pandemic, one and the same. Next slide, Mr. Stengel. So this is our new timeline. Should the board decide to go through with this opt-out resolution, we will come back to you on March 8th with a better budget, one with more information. The governor announces his budget every February, and we kind of decipher what that means and take that time to put that into our budget. And then we will continue on with our budget forum, where I will talk for about an hour specifically about the budget and drill down into some detail. And they will continue that pattern until we reach an adoption date of May 24th. So I'll take any questions on the opt-out resolution, but it is the superintendent's recommendation to move forward with this resolution.